There's always some crazy nonsense going on in Florida. I actually have a playlist on my channel called like the fascism nexus, and it's alluding to all of the different times I have to talk about Florida on this show, despite the fact that I live in Kansas, which, you know, is only marginally better. This time, apparently, some representative has filed a bill that is gonna target LGBT content as felony grooming, basically. You know, we've been calling this for a while, that they're going to try to restrict access to queer content online. I guess so this is probably intended to target queer content online, but it says content and communications, calling it grooming, with sentences of up to 15 years. And of course, apparently, now I need to read the actual bill, because she says the bill does not explicitly label queer content as grooming, but the sponsor of the bill has previously asserted that drag is, quote, evil grooming, and that it should be punished with felony prison sentences. So this is like the fruition of that intention. Florida has certainly earned its top spot in like at least the 5 worst states. It's got to be at least in the top 5. Like, what is worse than Florida? Texas is pretty bad, I guess. Let's not rank them specifically, but Texas and Florida are definitely in the top 5. The party of free speech striking again. Right. We've been discussing how this is going to be imposed on queer content. We've always just kind of assumed it's going to be under the whole, you know, lewd and lascivious content, you know, restricting access for youth to be able to see these things online under the guise of it being porn, essentially. And this is just sort of, instead of using the vague sexual impropriety language that you'll see on some of these things, this is taking it a step further and making it more explicit. Hey, real quick, hit the like button if you're enjoying the content. Hit the subscribe button as well and turn on all notifications. And also take a moment to check out the links in the description for merchandise and Patreon, where you can find exclusive free content. It says a person who engages in the process of preparing or encouraging a child to engage in sexual activity through overtly sexually themed communication with the child, or in contact with or observed by the child without permission from the child's parent or legal guardian, commits lewd or lascivious grooming. With the exception of if they get permission from their parent, they can do weird sex stuff in front of them. Like, I'm sorry, what? This is the child marriage loophole. Exactly. It's the loophole that says we're gonna go ahead and let you sell your kid. You can do weird, creepy stuff to a kid if their parent is around, apparently. So, but of course, they're writing this in a very broad way. So, oh yeah, encouraging a child to engage in sexual activity or preparing a child to engage in sexual activity through, quote, overtly sexually themed communication. Like, this is why sex education for queer people does not exist, right? You know, it's crazy that we explain this whole concept in school that you like have the pee-pee and it goes in the VV, and that's how like sexual reproduction happens, you know? And they even teach you how to have safe sex. Like, these are the ways that you do it, you know? You might need to lubricate the condom just in case, like, so that it doesn't break. And like, nobody teaches gay kids how to safely have sex. You know, as a matter of fact, lesbians as a demographic, like cisgender lesbians, have one of the highest reported instances of chlamydia of any other group, because they don't use barriers when they have sex, because they don't think they need to, because they're not protecting themselves from pregnancy. So yeah, this kind of thing, this whole preparing or encouraging a child to engage in sexual activity, it's going to allow you to clamp down on all kinds of things. And in this case, it enables you to clamp down on whatever queer activity you don't approve of. Bum, ba bum, bum, bum. Drink more water, y'all. She continues that, so apparently this bill was authored on behalf of the Christian Family Coalition, which is an anti-LGBTQ org, and the bill emerged following a meeting where there was an expressed need for, quote, anti-grooming legislation, and the prevention of the, quote, imposition of LGBTQ ideology were discussed. The wording is very vague, of course. Anything that could be deemed sexual by a prosecutor and viewed by someone under 16 could be categorized as grooming. Yeah, it's a very short bill. They cut right to the point. They don't go in depth so that anything could be considered lascivious. They're very good at this. They're very good at stepping around. It's the same thing as a don't say gay. Folks are like, oh, blah, blah, blah. They didn't even say gay in the thing, so how could it have anything to do with gay? Why are you calling it Don't Say Gay? Like, that's the whole point. They're just saying, you're not allowed to talk about things that we think are vaguely sexually inappropriate for this age group, and you can just call anything sexually inappropriate. This is why the whole kink at pride discourse is so tricky, because if you have, wearing certain bondage gear in public is technically some kind of voyeurism and, is some kind of exhibitionism, and people aren't consenting to seeing your kink in public, quote unquote. But that's the argument that leads to anti-cross-dressing laws, because transphobes believe, or at least they claim to believe, that trans people are engaging a sexual fetish by cross-dressing, and so therefore the logic follows that you are exhibitionist, exposing people to your kink without consent by wearing clothing related to the opposite sex or opposite gender. So yeah, and it's not a slippery slope argument, because people do make that argument that, like, I won't call you by your pronouns or whatever because I'm not gonna, like, you can't use me to get your rocks off. I don't consent to that. And like, that's what they at least profess to genuinely believe. The only counter to how scary these laws are is their increasing dumbness knocking out their legal legs in courts. Right, we can, as usual, hope that the courts take this stuff down, but everything that's gonna get appealed up to the Supreme Court is at dramatic risk of tipping the country away from queer rights and away from trans rights. That's the problem. Like, it's not necessarily a good thing that this is working its way through the courts to the Supreme Court, because yeah, they have the option at the Supreme Court to go, no, it's fine. You know, you've got it figured out down there at the lower level court. We don't need to check up on you and make sure that you did this correctly. We agree with the lower court on this, if the lower courts are saying that the transphobia is wrong. But I feel pretty confident that the Supreme Court is going to take a very active role in this, as opposed to just saying, we'll let the lower courts sort it out. You know, I have very little faith that it's going to go well through the court system, essentially. As an actual exhibitionist and a trans woman, being called she, her is not that at all. Yeah, amazing. Wow. Purity culture is the weirdest kink ever, and they force it on kids in abstinence class. Purity culture is weird. You know, it's weird how when straight people have a breeding kink, it's not really considered a breeding kink. In my mind, abstinence only is just orgasm denial. Change my mind. Listen, that's pretty funny. And of course, there is always the risk of, you know, if you reduce sex education, that enables predators to do things and the kids are not able to articulate what's going on. A reduction in sex education results in more teen pregnancy, more child abuse. So imagine being the party who wants to oppose sex education for kids. Interesting tactical concept that Democrats could start flooding the legal system with cases surrounding a whole bunch of, maybe they could even start challenging a whole bunch of archaic laws that we don't even enforce anymore, but Mama specifies fascist laws, and force the Supreme Court to offload some of that workload to lower courts. Right. You know, if we're just going to inundate them with too many court cases, they can't even hear all the cases. They have to keep passing, but they're still going to prioritize the trans stuff. Purity culture and abstinence only turned at least one preacher's daughter I know into a polyamorous atheist. Sometimes it backfires, you know? I grew up with a preacher's kid as my friend, and they turned into a trans gay guy, so it happens to the best of us. Hi, thank you so much to all of my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Amanda B., Michelle Frateroli, Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Danielle McDonald, DZXN, Suzanne Maynard, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Jamie Jam, Pasnell Infinity, Nova, Elizabeth Bartell, Sojo, Sarah A., Athiet, Kevin Young, Celeste, Desi Quiche, Liam Hodgson, Mr. Atheist, and Ella V. Nobody.